La Lanterna, a spotlight in Italian football, is a podcast that dives into the beautiful game seen from the eyes of two fans from the oldest team in Italy's point of view. My name is Fabrizio Cardone, Canadian and Genovese, together with my friend Matt Killen, an American-born and Genoa fan. Every week, we'll tell you all you need to know about the only team you need to know about, Genoa CFC. Plus, we'll have guests and provide updates from around the magical world of Italian football. Welcome back to La Lanterna podcast. This is Fabrizio, finally, again, with my best buddy,
Matt. What's up, Fabrizio?
So when was last time? When was last time?
I don't know. It was a long time ago. It was probably after the second match day, I think, or something. It's been a minute.
We did lose a lot to talk about, but not really much to really discuss.
Let's be honest. I don't know if there's been a lot really to talk about. We've had some kicks in the gut left and right. People are getting hurt. We're not looking good. We're close to the relegation places. I mean, where do you want to start? How should we...
Well, okay, let's first say it's match day 6. It's still way early in the game to determine relegation or not relegation. Definitely, I can foresee well-balanced in the mid to low table the teams. So that does not make it easy, but it also makes it easy similarly to Serie B, where it was easy to drop down, but it's also easy to come back up. That's what it looks like right now, because there's at least like 6-7 teams like in a range of 2-3 points. So,
well, remember, I think one weird thing is like, we just remember that last season our target was 40 points, which is a little bit more than one point a match after 38 played total. We're obviously less than a point per match now with 5 points out of 6 matches, but like really what that shows you is there are a lot of teams that are kind of in a similar competitive place, as you mentioned, right? There have been some bigger teams that have been dropping points. You've had some quote unquote smaller teams getting results. So, in a good sense, that means that there is probably less stratification, a little bit more parity, a little bit more opportunity. It also means that there are not going to be as many games that are like, okay, this is 3 points for us. And yeah, I mean, some of the results also, I would say, us not even getting 3 points is not a surprise. We just played Juve. It was kind of my point in the group chat. Not that we ever want to give up points to Juve, but let's be honest, we always lose points when we play Juve. We don't want to lose points when we're playing a team like Verona. And of course, sometimes,
and Venezia.
And Venezia, exactly. So those examples in this current season are bad. Getting a point out of Roma, that's good. But we don't want to see the Veronas, the Venezias, the teams we're playing that are going to be in probably our same part of the table. We don't want to be giving them points because that has a direct impact to both of us in a probably a larger way. Given that we're more than likely not going to be competing with Juve in much of this season.
So, remember in the chat, I was telling you about the fact of if we had the podcast a few days ago, I would have been very upset and angry. So it's better. I think it was yesterday or something like that. Anyways, my point was because also the sentiment that is coming around with respect from the fans and all the Genoani and whatnot, also from, at least from an outside perspective, it looks like we're like the minnows again. So from last year showing that we were a tough team to beat, from this year to be the team that doesn't seem even to be able to score anymore. So we were known to have a very solid defense, not the best offense. In fact, I think we scored, and you're better than I am with respects to stats, but I remember that when it came to chances on goal or those type of statistics and whatnot, I think we were the last ones in the actually entire league. While when it came to defense, it was a solid defense. Now, if you look at the last 5 matches, we did 2 goals and conceded 9. So that what is that telling you?
Yeah, I mean, it's not looking wonderful. Like we've not had quite the same defensive record. I think is obvious. Of course, as you mentioned that it's kind of, it hits you in the face when you say that stuff out loud, because that's obviously been what Gila's pride has been with the squad. It's very good. We saw this in Serie B too, really focusing on having the defensive side of the match in order and having that sorted out, ceding possession even, and taking your chances when you get them. And right, exactly, like we didn't create an enormous amount of chances last season, but we were really, really good at taking them. And there were different reasons for that. There were really strong performances from set pieces. I think we forget a little bit, like kind of forgot about it because we ended up performing well without him. But Radu Dragusin was responsible for a handful of points that we got last year by being active and being able to score off of corners. And we're not seeing that same type of action as much. I don't know if it's really purely a player personnel problem. I don't know if it's like Radu was that fantastic at the whole thing. But it's just an example, right? Like you would see at the beginning of the season, there was lots of those goals that we were just getting and we're nicking last year from those really critical set piece dead ball type moments. We got a little bit of that towards the end of the season last year too, with like free kicks from Malinowski and things like that. And then of course you have the brilliance of Gudmundsson, and maybe we saw it more so in the beginning of the campaign before he was hurt, but Retegi's influence, I believe that that's a real thing. I personally have a lot of sympathy and similar feelings to where many Genoani are feeling right now about the squad. I know that like when the campaign was beginning, we were talking about the team having the capabilities, but we're also decimated from an injury side of things. And unfortunately, like of course it's easy to say now, hindsight's 2020, but I think the frustrating thing with all of this, before we get into the negatives too much, is like I think we also saw this coming. If we're going to have players get injured and playing significant minutes into a campaign, who do you think the guys that are going to get injured are? Probably the oldest guys on the squad. Well, Adel, most recently, Husky's not going to be coming back at all. And then Macias. And Macias, of course, has that history as well. So I think it looks dire because we're missing what we were missing in the very early stage of last season's campaign against Fiorentina, that we figured out really quickly. And we had that weird match against Bologna too that didn't really look very good for us in the beginning. But that's where I think when you sit and you watch and you're sitting at it for 90 minutes, and even with guys like Pinamonti or Vitinha who are out there on the pitch, we're just not cohesive. And you see that and you feel it, and it feels like this lack of connection and this style of being very, defensive oriented is going to be, it's taking its toll on us.
Well, that's a good point that you actually bring up. So let's quickly talk about the transfer market, because a lot of people are talking about that we didn't replace the players that were sold. So I just briefly talk about it. I don't waste too much time on it, but more or less, correct me if I'm wrong, besides like a few extras and so on, obviously there was a lot of not right to buy, but obligations to buy that we had to exercise and so on. Those count towards the books, right? But mostly what I'm referring to is Martinez leaves and we get Golini. Then we have Retegi goes out and we had Pinamonti. And then we have Gudmundsson, which is probably the hottest one that is contentious for a lot of people, where by the words of Gilardino, he's saying Miretti is the new Gudmundsson. So out of this comment that I just said, plus out of all the other ones, and I'm wrapping back to what you just said about the fact of things that were missing also from last year, I'm more or less trying to get at is we're still missing what we're still missing from last year. rather than just crying on what we lost and we didn't gain the same levels. What do you think?
Well, saying that another way is that we had players covering up for deficiencies last season. And I think that could also be very true. I don't know if I necessarily completely agree with that, because I think tactically we got a lot of things right last season. Our responses were good. There's a reason I think we were behind the team and the manager and the players. But I don't know. I think it has to be apparent. Like I rate Golini. I think he's a fine keeper. I rate Pinamonti. I think he's a fine striker. I don't think he is. I don't think we got a crap striker, and that's why we're not doing very well. But I do think that I think that the issue is sort of separate. I don't think it's entirely one for one. So we never actually did replace Radu Dragusin. I think we're expecting that within the lineup that De Winter, who's been shit, let's be honest, De Winter has had a bad season, and that has majorly affected us. Bonnie gets hurt earlier in the campaign. I like Voyako. I like Vasquez. But we've not had that same level at all defensively. We did not replace that, and we're thin there. Maturo is really young. He's been hurt a lot of times. It's a weird thing that all of a sudden we have this position of strength and real depth, and now all of a sudden, if De Winter is all of a sudden losing confidence and not a player, we are super thin at that position because we're playing 3 guys every single week. We don't have a chance to rotate and to move. And so I think that kind of answers maybe partially what could be going on with defense. I also think we are chopping and changing a lot the fullback situation and what's going on there, and maybe there's a little bit of a lack of cohesion. That not looked at the matches enough, to be honest with you, to see where exactly the breakdowns are happening defensively. But I think just objectively, it's not been wonderful for De Winter, and I think that's partially why that some of those things are happening. But I think on the other side of the coin, Miretti could well be Goodmanson. We might see this team rebound, but I think really it's maybe what I would maybe say is that if you're going to have an anger towards 777 and towards how we handled the transfer market, I think the angers were sort of misplaced. And where I was kind of coming from, we were having these arguments on the group chats before the season began. When people were really vouching for this squad and talking about the talent in this squad, what were the names that were usually being brought up as these? We have really, really good players. It was Macias. It was Malinovsky. Malinovsky is pretty old. Macias is old. We have Milan Badel, who is closer to 40 years old. These guys are all talented players. I love Milan Badel. Milan Badel has been the glue player for this squad for such a long time. But we don't have a Badel replacement. We don't really have a Macias replacement. And we definitely don't have a Malinovsky replacement. There are very few players that play like he does. And, we made decisions last season to bring these guys on. They had Serie A experience. But, there was, honestly, I was kind of a head scratcher. We signed Macias to a really long contract. It's going to expire when he's in his mid 30s or something. And we know that he has that injury history. The Malinovsky thing, I think, is bad luck. That injury was terrible. And I think it's going to be really a long time before, obviously, we're going to see him. I don't think we're going to see him at all this season. He might not look the same player next season. It's a serious injury. We all saw it. But, when you think about that part of the pitch, Goodmanson was able to do so much, and he was energetic and electric. I actually don't mind that we sold him. I think most Genoani don't mind that we sold him. And Miretti could be that guy, but it's 6 matches into the campaign. When did we sell Goodmanson anyway? It was after the first match, I think. So he maybe didn't have a real chance of playing until the second or the third match already. But I think we've obviously not seen that as fans yet. That's somewhat understandable. But to sum it up for me, we had other deficiencies in the squad that I think actually needed more attention. And we didn't get them because we had instead to focus on moving players out. In the end of the day,
very true.
We are healthier. We are healthier financially as a club, and that we should be somewhat thankful for at least. But I think that's part of it. It's we had good players and we shipped them out, and we had to prioritize replacing them instead of prioritizing strengthening the squad. And now we're seeing what's happening there when you have some guys drop.
I don't disagree with you. I put down here in the captions the fact that Badel 34, Macias 33, Malinowski 31. So you are right, they're old. But if we go back in the early days when 777 came along and they were focusing mostly on foreigners, it seemed at that point anyways, mostly from Northern Europe. And they wanted to focus obviously on these potential future talented players, hence Frandrups, Dracosine, hence Gudmundsson, and so on. and they were focusing mostly, what I'm trying to get at with this is like the fact that they wanted to focus mostly on the younger players. But soon enough, we realized that there is a need for talented, qualitative, senior, quote unquote, senior players, meaning players with more experience. And that's probably why we came back to keeping these type of aged players, because also in the locker room, it comes, Bani's included with this group. These are the players that show them what it's all about and so on. I'm not saying I disagree with you, but pointing on these ones is the big issue, and we saw that also last year when we had a very solid. If you really think about it, look at our midfield last year with Badel, Strootman, Frandrup, and a mix. Like you could have Malinowski, or you could have 3 or 4 different choices in the middle there. But it was a solid, especially in the first half with Strootman at the better part of Strootman's season itself. And anyways, the second half he went a little bit downwards, more injuries and so on. But we had a very solid one. Now this year, no more Strootman. Definitely Malinowski's out, as you mentioned. Horrible, obviously his injury. Probably some people talk about maybe at the end of his career. And now Badel is out. We'll talk about the infirmary right after. Who's left?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I think the point is essentially that when you're looking up and down, and that's where there's risk. Like Macias has had a clear-cut injury history, and we all know that. Badel hasn't had that as much. Malinowski hasn't had it as much. I think he had a little bit of that at Atalanta, but not to the extent that Macias had more recently. But you just think about, like, I think how Gilardino wants to play, and how we rotate this squad, actually not that much. And so, like, you're asking kind of a lot of these guys. And I understand kind of the idea of, well, we need some seniority, we need some leadership, like we're trying to grow our younger players. And there's the whole kind of concept of growth and being able to sell the players for more value. And in concept, you absolutely have to have leadership to do that. But like, who are the guys coming behind these guys is the problem. And we just really don't have answers to that. And we're seeing it right now. Like, I don't think we were ever expecting a match where Honor was going to start for us. And Bohinen has not looked very good. He got some time last match. I guess you can figure it out now. Aconero, I don't know. I mean, these guys are all really, really, really young. And it just feels like it's really difficult. And now obviously we've caught ourselves in a sort of way. And the other thing that maybe we should pivot to, so we talked about the squad a little bit and where we are. There's the other kind of side of this, which is, do we still have enough talent, but we just need to organize ourselves differently?
That's the whole point of discussions that are happening right now. A little bit with respect to the papers, a little bit among the fans, a whole bunch of things like this. Like, what's happening? We have most of the prime squad is in the infirmary, and you mentioned most of them. We can add their Frandrup also. We can add,
that's really rough. That happening recently is a killer for us.
And he was like our robot for last year. I think besides one that he was he had 3 yellow cards, so he was banned for that one match. He never missed one match last year. So we were so used to having, besides the fact of his performance lately has a little bit been very different. And I'll get to that in a little bit. Then we have Ekuban that is out. We talked about Messias, we talked about Malinowski, we talked about now Badel. Minetti? No, what's his name again? The Juve guy? No, the Juve guy. The one that is replacing Gudmundsson, I can't remember now. Miretti. So Miretti has come out of a very severe injury. So even Gilardino's words were he only has at the most half an hour on his legs. But even in Juve's match, he was probably one of the freshest. Like he was the one that really had the head into it. Essentially, what I'm trying to get at, and. So, but he's not there yet. So it'll take, usually what they say, after a severe injury, it takes at least a month-ish, 3 matches, maybe, 3 weeks. What I'm trying to say with this is that now on the mouth of everyone is the fact of let's go and dip into the pockets and go and look for some free agents. Gilardino's words were, if they are free agents, there is a reason to that they are at home. So don't go and find people just because we need them. I need people that are ready. Those are his words. So also if you're talking about players from different leagues, that means they are not ready. And at the same time, there's that whole, which is probably the next topic that I wanted to cover, is what's really happening at 777.
I mean, these are all things we can talk about. I think look, the transfer thing is the transfer thing, but it honestly just sucks. Like, and that explanation of Miretti is for me even more damning. It's like, if we know you're signing a player who's not going to be available for a quarter of the season, and we just lost our key player, and the trade that you're making for this whole thing is like 3/4 of the season, you're going to have a replacement who's 21. We've never seen do it before, but he's going to be fine and he's going to hit the rock, be ready, that period of time. Like, that's a big fucking loss. I'm sorry. But like, and again, like, we're not strengthening elsewhere because we have to fucking replace this guy. So, and it's obviously what's going on. There was lots of financial motivation behind the transfer dealings that happened this summer. And some of that I think was valid. Some of it seemed a little bit like 777's own doing. We can talk about that a little bit. And if we want to focus on that first, I think we can. The thing is, like, I don't know. We obviously, none of us know exactly what's going on behind closed doors. It's been apparent for some time that they've been in a serious amount of trouble. It's concerning. I think the thing, I'm honestly, where they are and what's going on with them, I'm somewhat less concerned about right now, because it sucks and it's bad and it's going to implode. And I would be absolutely shocked if this group is still owning this club in 3 years' time. I think everything about what they have done, what's gone out there, how they've handled themselves, how they've overly extended themselves, it all smells like a problem, and they're going to need to unwind their investments at some point. I think that if that happens, fine, but what can't happen is that we are in a position where we are really in a poor place financially. So again, like, I'm personally thankful that at least they're continuing to help strengthen the coffers. There are owners out there, I think we have to say this, that have effectively pocketed money from the club and then left the club in a total gut-wrenching situation that takes them years to get out of. This season really sucks right now. I don't think we're in that situation, but we really, really, really need to make sure we stay in Serie A this season. And that's where, like, really all the focus has to be. And so then it becomes, if you take Gila's comments at face value, everyone else at home is at home for a reason. It's like, okay, fine, I guess. Then we have to make it work with the guys that we have. And I think that's when you have to say, like, I'm sure Gila is saying the same thing. This 3-5-2 thing isn't working anymore. We're not getting the connection. And that's, I think, what a lot of fans are seeing. There's not enough connection between the midfield, maybe even between the midfield and the defense, let alone the midfield and our attackers. And one thing about this, I don't know if you have any thoughts on this or what, but in the early days of Gila's system, we were so dependent on our wingbacks Like that was how we got it all done. And if you remember in Serie B, like there were so many big moments that we had from Sabelli and from others, that famous assist to Puskás, all these things that kind of had happened. It was really about getting wide, playing these dangerous balls in somehow, and creating some kind of quick counterattacky chances that gave us a chance to win. And it's not something we've seen at all this season, which for me is bizarre. Like I think the other thing is Genoani so far. I just have to shrug my shoulders. I don't know when we're going to see a really good performance from him, but it's not come yet. Aaron Martin has looked better this campaign than he did last campaign. That's a positive thing. We've not seen enough of Norton Cuffy, but it doesn't necessarily look like we can count on him right now. I mean, it's probably too early to write him off, but it just doesn't seem like. It seems like a lot of the things we've got, like we added Norton Cuffy, we added Genoani, we're not really getting a lot from those two state of today. And I don't know if you have any thoughts on, is it, am I alone in thinking that this is a big problem for us? Do you think there's a reason for it?
Well, okay. The module, obviously there's an issue that it could be the players, it could be that it has become predictable. Going back to what I said before, is we had a solid midfield, and the truth is it wasn't a 3-5-2. The truth is it was a 3-5-1-1. And that the second last one was Gudmundsson. So that fantasist that essentially Girardino said, do what you want to do. That's your area. Do as you please. And he hasn't really had a chance to replace that. He hasn't had the thoughts behind that in order to say, okay, wait a minute. Now I don't have him anymore. I need to do something different. While he's expecting others to pick up the slack of what are the feet that need to be filled, the shoes that need to be filled, and that's one of the issues I find. The fact of the predictability right now of the 3-5-2 based on the players that we have. One thing that I really liked about Girardino was the ability. Not always, he made his mistakes, but he has learned a lot since the beginning. Was the fact of being able to, as a chameleon, in order to change the shape and the skin of the team based on the players and on the situation. Now, Girardino comes from a 4-4-2 from the Primavera days. Now, I don't want to compare that to here, but that seemed more to be his model, or maybe that was the model based on the players. We also have to remember that the sports director, so in this case it would be Ottolini and company, are the ones that dictate more or less what the formation, not the formation, but the module should be based on the players that they get. Now, did we get the right players and the enough players? No, we talked about that. We can talk about that till tomorrow or for a month or for the whole season anyways. But I like him to step up now. I don't have issues with Gilardino other than the fact of trying to step up, understand what you have at play right now, especially now with all this huge players that are not available anymore. And maybe change that module based on who you have rather than inventing players to be in that role. And that what leads me also to think about Vitinha was another player that was supposed to be your post Gudmundsson, and he still hasn't shown what his potential is or what we were expecting him to be. Let's not forget that we had to fork out 16 million because we really thought that we believed in this player.
Well, but we definitely need more from Vitinha, but I think it's just something seems like it's maybe was not aligned very well. It might be, maybe you're right. Maybe actually we had a different appraisal of these players and they're just not performing to the way that they should be. Like that's part of this too, that sometimes doesn't get talked about because we focus so much on the decisions of the board and the manager and stuff. I think that's a real thing. It has to be, because that is a factor in how all these things happen. But I worry, though, really seriously, if anyone was to mistake Vitinha, I don't think that they were mistaking Pinamonti, but Vitinha or Miretti for Gudmundsson and how they play. These guys operate very differently. Like they play very differently. And if that was the module that we needed to play, and you need this guy to kind of come back and facilitate and distribute and move up and have this kind of chemistry with the striker, they don't really operate in that way, these guys. It's not that they're not skilled players, but I've not seen enough from Miretti, but it's not looked like that's how he plays to me. And so, that's a really big miss when you lose a guy like Gudmundsson. And I think the other part of this, which a lot of us were really crying out for, was, which I think is also real, probably, that movement away from Gudmundsson. Okay, so he doesn't play the first match. We sell him after the first match. Now we are into the season. You had a whole offseason of preparation, of training, probably with Gudmundsson still envisioned to be part of that team. That's not there anymore. I mean, as far as we know, he was participating in all the training sessions. So, like, you're having the same kind of constellations, and then you lose this guy who is special and different, and your whole way of playing is now out the window. And now the season has begun. You don't have time to say, we had one international break, but at that point, we really didn't know what we had. So you don't have that reset button opportunity where you can say, how are we going to set ourselves up and how are we going to do these things differently? And I don't mean to suggest that Gilardino just was like throwing shit against the wall for like the last several weeks. But I think probably out of air of everything else and the way that they've approached training, introducing a whole new module to this specific group with all the additions and changes that have happened was probably too challenging. I think he's recognizing at this point that they are not having success. The fact we don't need to talk about what happened in the midweek, I would rather not talk about it. But like the fact that happened against a far inferior side tells you all that you need to know. Like we're not doing enough to make this happen offensively for us. And we are also simultaneously not tight enough defensively for us to be nicking 1-goal wins because we're just letting too many goals in. So we're not going to be winning 1-0. So we have to change it. And I believe in my bones that Gilardino is seeing exactly the same thing that we're seeing. And I think for different reasons, he's maybe been compromised in doing so. But it's something that obviously we need to figure out quickly because this campaign can get behind us pretty fast if we keep dropping points like this.
So Verona, Venezia, even Roma, because we were very lucky to score right at the very top.
That's true. The Roma match, we did not deserve a point from that, to be
right. So those were 3 matches that, truthfully, I see them as 3 losses. I'm not going to even mention the Coppa Italia one because that's just like pathetically ridiculous what happened there.
You mentioned it, I'll throw up on this camera.
Well, my point here with saying this is Genoa cannot become suddenly. Now, if you look at the infirmary, it makes more sense now because you say, well, shit, there's like 5, 6, 7 from your typical starting line, right? Yeah. That are not there anymore. But this started earlier, like from match day 2, that it started to go downfall because with the Inter match, you're like, oh, hey, it's the same of us from last year. The team is there. What my worrisome is you see the players are not the core that we didn't change many players, especially at back. We're the same players. So what happened? Something has happened. And let me add something to that. At the Juve match, we always have the pre-match press conference by Gilardino. Gilardino did not do that press conference. There was no press conference. That's a first. Like, what is he going to say? He's going to say the usual BS or, the typical script that he does in every before the match. Oh, that team is very dangerous. They're very strong. They are either up there because they're deserving. They're low down, but they don't deserve to be down. It's not really saying much. Yeah. But not showing up, canceling a press conference, that shows me there's an issue in the locker room.
It's an issue somewhere, and it very well could be the locker room where there's more divisions in it all. I mean, my worry, I think many people's worry right now is that, we can figure out how to scrape and claw our way into, salvation this season. And I think that there's many people that still have the hope. I do too, that that's something that we can do. But you worry after a season like we just had, the impact a season like this can have on a person like Gilardino, on a person like Frendrup, when we just had been making these major gains and builds as an organization, and we've been really demonstrating ourselves. We've been getting people's attention. It happened so quickly. I think many people in Europe had not really had the opportunity to say, "Wow, Genoa's solid. Genoa's like advancing. They're growing back into what we saw them being in the early 2010s." And so now you have this reset mode that happens seemingly for financial reasons. And because of that, everything is in disarray. Everything is in chaos. We're not growing. We're receding. We're not building. We're trying to get back to where we were. We're having to reinvent how we're playing the game because we've made such drastic changes. I think I am definitely much more of the camp that when you're making these adjustments and movements to key positions, whether or not we've brought in like for like players, I don't think it's always as simple as this player then just gets transplanted into the team and now they understand exactly what they need to do. It takes time, and especially when some of those players have a little bit different qualities, you have to figure the whole thing out. And so, the other concern with all of this stuff is like, there were reports that Gudmundsson was not happy and all these things, and that's why we kind of maybe acquiesced to the Fiorentina deal more. And I think a lot of people were sort of upset about what that deal was. In concept, could you imagine the same thing happening with Frendrup next season, where I don't want to play for a team that's a up and down yo-yo team that might be getting relegated. I want to build on my career and play in Europe and do whatever. And if he's angry about it, are we going to sell him for like 10 million euro? Like, does that seem out of that? Like, that's the type of situation that we're kind of looking at. I don't want to put too much of that out there in the world, but like, that's what's at risk. That's where I'm most concerned. Like, it's that, and then it's also the potential that any day now 777 goes belly up and we're fucked because we're relegated and we have certain payment obligations that all of a sudden we can't make. And I don't know enough about what that looks like. I don't think that we're in that dire of a place because I think most of our debts, we're still chipping away at our overall debt. But like, those are the two things that are unfortunately now just going to be hanging over us the whole rest of the season as we're watching these matches and just hoping we are officially back. I think we can say this emphatically. We are back in a place right now, whether we should be or not, whether we have the talent or not, where every single match we have to get a point. And we are going to be hoping and praying that we get a point. It's back to the Ballardini type of watching matches again, after having this joy of the last two seasons where playing is more fun and we can go against anybody. Like, at this point now, the way it looks, until we get this squad figured out, and it could happen, that could happen, don't get me wrong, it's going to be, let's fucking hope that we get a draw out of this match. And that's going to be what it's going to look like. And this next run of fixtures is really tough. Like, we're playing Atalanta, we have Bologna, we have Lazio, Fiorentina, Parma, Como, Cagliari to get us to November 24. And you've got more matches coming on the other side of that, getting into the Christmas break.
There's no Christmas break, right?
You're right. Actually, there is no Christmas break. We're playing on the 22nd and again on the 29th.
Keep in mind that after the Atalanta match, we have the international break. So that's a good thing. That's a positive, finally, that I can say with respects to the international
I know,
breaks.
we've been so negative this pod, but it's
Well, I don't know about negativity. I think I just want to outline what the truth is out there, rather than just people saying, oh, Gilardino has to leave. He's disgusting. He's an idiot.
Come on, guys. You can't get there yet, right? Already 6 matches in.
Well, these are people that are so used to Preziosi that was ready to fire, coaches every. So we remember, right? We were having 2-3 coaches every year.
No, I
know. That's the truth. So a lot of people are just used to that. So that's what happens. Let's blame the coach. That's what they're used to. Anyways, my concern is a little bit more into the 777 side. So it's nothing against 777 side, because if you look at the actually club or the financial slash enterprise level, I think they're building it perfectly. We just got another sponsorship, so that shows that there is interest. They have the right people out there fetching for, fresh money, and this is what makes us to be self-sustainable. Now, the issue is obviously there is a freeze happening right now at the 777 level. So we're not talking about the Genoa club itself, but the 777 level. Obviously, they are in deep, excuse my language, but they're in deep shit. So I think it all came down from, it's just my supposition. We don't need to go into it, but I'm not sure if it happened. That's my theory anyways. But let's say after Everton, they got the full stop, they could not proceed with purchasing them, then all the creditors, because essentially 777 is a fund, or it's, I can't remember now the word, but it's essentially they're using others' money in order to invest. And obviously they had this business plan, which apparently arrived to a point where they said, wait a minute, now that's not good anymore. And they have to retract. And not only because of that, but because of other issues that happened of suing and blocking things and so on. From a financial perspective, there's a freeze. And that's why we didn't see any real weakness at the transfer market. And that's why we're not going to see much coming out from our coffins, at least anytime soon, until...
Coffers. You did this again.
Yeah, again. Sorry, out of the covers. But at the same time, that's what we're going to have to wait. So it's either things are going to go back into play how they used, in a good way, like positively speaking, or we find a buyer. Eventually, there's a buyer that comes in the scene and says, okay, this is a very good, financially healthy. Yes, a little bit of debt still happening there. Who doesn't have debts? But I want to buy them out. And until that happens, I think this is the place where I think we're stuck. And I'm going to give you my theory here. One reason, and I'm not trying to put here, like, as we say in Italian, zizzania or Genoese, which is put, rumors into place where they're not there. Mm-hmm. But what if there is this freeze, what if there are issues with the wages?
Well, 100%. I mean, we've seen that already with 777 with their own entities. They've had that happen to them. So like they're all of those things are like, unfortunately, like actual concerns and risks that are out there. And that's what I mean, where just like everything about this is not good, because I mean, I think like to your point, we were clearly in a place where we were not able to, I think just to make sure like it's clear what we're saying, there was a lot of focus on austerity and getting money back from player sales. This wasn't like, hey, we got profit from the Retegui deal, we're going to put that back into 777's business. That's not at all what happened. Like, that's not what's going on. But what is happening on the inverse of this is that, okay, we're overall, because they're owning this company, they're reducing their debt by reducing Genoa's debt. So we are mutually aligned there. They need to make sure that our debts are as minimal as possible so that they are themselves not carrying them and not at risk for defaulting on paying them. So it's obviously something that they're concerned about, they're focused on. To your point, it looks far more likely that this big grand 777 multi-club project that Wander has had is not going to maybe go any farther than it has. At least not right now. And more than likely, to your point, I definitely see this, and I agree with you that there's going to be a lot more of a focus on sustainable management, and we're not going to be seeing big investments in the club. Right, yeah. Your titles were cooking me up, by the way. It says Josh Wander, MIA. He is also in Miami, but he is also MIA, and I think that's fine. But I think the thing I'm saying is we're probably looking at seasons where we're selling players to chip away in debt and we're buying players at lower value amounts. And that's the only way that we're going to be looking at this club. And there are clubs that have done this and have done this successfully. I've mentioned in the past my affinity for club management from Bundesliga clubs like Freiburg. that are a really, really tiny, small club in the Black Forest in Germany, and they managed to buy themselves a new stadium and compete almost. I think they did even compete in Europe, and really focused very, very much on cheap player acquisition and development and youth squads and teams. And so like, there's a way to do this. There is a real way. Like we were never going to be Chelsea, really. I know we were trying to be like that with Preziosi, but like that was never going to be us. We were never going to be out there just spending huge sums of money and just constantly putting ourselves out there and then bringing in these big names. Like that was never the 777 plan. I don't think any of us really wanted that, to be honest. Like we had seen that fall on its face so many times, so many players were past their prime or something that were big names. They came into Marassi and you know, we owed wages or, you know, all the different things that had happened there. But it does mean that like the real face of this is that our academy has got to catch up. We need our academy players to be doing a lot more, and our scouting has got to catch up. And I think like I'm willing to let it slide for now, but we have to say that outside of the first real round of a 777 recruitment that has taken place, really the Spores era of our recruitment policies, assuming he was more directly responsible for it, we have not seen a lot of great acquisition since then. I think that's a fact. You know, you put Vitinha hopefully in the category of that being a counterstatement, with him looking really good at the end of the season, but he's not been super involved so far. And I agree, it has more to do with formation and involvement than the player. But you know, all the guys we think about, the Dragushins, who I've mentioned a couple times in this podcast, the Frendrups, the Goodmansons, those guys came from that ridiculous January transfer window, and they actually, a lot of them stuck, and a lot of them were players who moved on to profit. Joseph Martinez came in that same window. So these are guys that like were all critically important to the team, and all of those guys are guys that we ended up selling for profit. Obviously, Retegi was a little bit of a different story, but we've got to figure it out. Obviously, we've got to make sure that that is something that we can be confident in, because it's the only way. And how this could go sideways for us is if we do have a, like, I don't think, I just have this feeling, I don't think that 777 are going to react like this, but how this can go bad for clubs is if we start sliding again, and we start sliding in results. And then we have to look at something like, okay, do we need to replace the manager? And then all of a sudden we're doing the same thing that we're doing with Sheva, where we're still paying fucking Sheva's wages. And then we're paying Gila's wages. And we're paying well, we actually aren't anymore, but we were. You understand my point. I mean, how many times were we running this in Preziosi's era where we had like 4 managers on the books or something stupid? And then all of a sudden you have that wage out there. The results are sliding. Now you're reacting quickly by investing in the player you probably shouldn't be investing in. You're doing short-term things for the club. And then all of a sudden you start going down, and then all of a sudden you lose that TV value. And now you're really fucked, because you have all of this debt that you owe. You're not bringing the money in the same way. And clubs can go under because of that. I don't think that that's going to happen with us, because I think 777 are savvy enough to know that they should not be doing that stuff. And I think that there obviously no one intends to go out there and put a club in that type of a situation. But I think even if we were to really slide the way that could happen, it's difficult for me to imagine us responding by reacting in a really rash manner. I think there's actually more likelihood, to your point, that the January transfer window for us is quiet, that we don't see very much movement, if any movement. And if we go down, we go down. I think that is going to be more than likely the response from management than we're going to spend big and then we're going to put ourselves in a bad way.
I don't know about that. If we go down, we go down. But
no, I'm not saying that like that's something.
No, I know. Well, let me say this. Even in this situation, Juve did not look that dangerous, at least in the first half. Then after our mistakes, then that's when they came back up. So let's also say that. We've had a lot of bad luck, bad choices from some players. One above all, of course, is De Winter. Now, with all these injuries, our pitching into free agents has now become Melegoni. We had him on our still books. He still has not been placed somewhere, so he is officially going to be. At least he's a midfielder, right? So let's put him to use. I know I'm laughing too, but
it's true. You're right, though. He's still on the books, so fuck it. Why not
work instead of just doing your own shit? Anyways, we have a good core. Injuries are going to eventually come back. I personally think it's a mentality thing, and if Gila has one thing on his leave, is being able to put those players together.
Yeah, I mean, there's still enough.
And to close this, just to say that officially since tomorrow, the team is going to go in retreat. So a lot of people are talking bad about it. A lot of people are saying it's needed and so on. I don't have any specific feeling about it. If the coach or management feels that there is a need for a retreat, I don't know if I'm using the right word in English, but it's essentially you go off a few days up until the match away from home, and you're all in the same hotel and you're at different training grounds and so on. Recently, you don't really see that too much in modern soccer. We've seen that a while back, if you remember, with Napoli, when what's his face was so pissed with his players, and he just said, "Nope, nobody's go out with the women and so on. Y'all have to stay here with me and decide if you want to stay here or not." That was a couple of years ago, but so there's this sort of retreat. I don't know if that's the right word.
No, it's about right. I think retreat in the context that I know it is almost more of a you might not be necessarily putting in the same practice or work, which I don't think is happening. I think they are still doing that. It's just in a different remote place, and with the intention of like less distractions, team togetherness, probably efforting and focus on bonding. I mean, look at all the things that we're saying. I think we've been pretty level-headed with this today. Like, there's still talent in the squad. There's no question about that. But like, we have to find a different way of getting these players to work together, and it's just tough. Like, it's a frustrating thing when you make changes like that, because you're just pretty much necessitating that you have to change the way that you're doing things. And we had a good way of doing things last season, but we've now had to change that now because we've made adjustments to how the squad is composed. And also we've had a lot of injuries that have made us have to respond to this whole thing. So knowing that that's the case, that what is it that we can do? And we have seen more flexibility maybe than people realize or remember from Gilardino. So I don't believe that this is just like he's only capable of defensive play. And again, I know we don't want to talk about the midweek, the cup match, but I honestly think it surprised most people that he approached the match like that. Even knowing that like that's how we've been playing for most of the last two seasons, being uber defensive and counterattacky against like a frail Serie B side was ridiculous. Like, and it cost us in the end.
Matt, again, have you ever seen or remember a Genoa that was not like that?
What in what way?
Like, not uber defensive.
I mean, I think that we've had moments like, look, the Ballardini era, we had to be defensive in our own ways too, but I think we had more cohesion and play. What we're talking about here is extreme in terms of how we're playing the match. We gave Sampdoria 70% of the ball. That's fucking ridiculous. That is insane. There's no reason for that. Like, there's no reason that we would approach that. And if you go back to the Ballardini era, like, we were not playing matches like that. Yes, we were more defensive. We had that kind of type of a thing, but that we weren't approaching the game like we're just going to, and it's not exactly like we're just sitting back, but it's an intentional ceding of possession for the sake of exposing and identifying counterattacks. It's just not something that, we've had that be successful again for different reasons in the last two seasons. But against a side like that, you think we're going to go after it. And there have been matches too where we have been more offensive. Like I think it's not exactly right to say Gilardino's only plays this style. I just think that like this season and in general, that's been the way that he's approached it. And it just against a side like that, with us playing a full strength side too, it was an unusual choice, I thought. And obviously it was too much of a risky one because I don't think we needed to play and approach the match like that. I think most people thought.
There has to be a reason behind that. I personally think that Gilardino's not stupid, so he understands that the choices he makes and so on, and the consequences he gets out of that. I mean, there is a reason for that. I don't disagree with any of what you said. What I'm trying to say is, like, in order for him to have done that, there has to be a reason. Whether that is issues in the locker room or push from the above. Like, he was a striker. Why would he always do this? Especially from a Serie B team, fourth last, whatever that might have been back then. Anyways, who cares about that? Let's hope, as he always does, let's hope that he really learns from the mistakes or from moments that you learn. Last but not least, we've had a lot of quietness from the club. And on Thursday, Blasquez, which we have not heard since the news of Josef Martinez being sold to Inter at the early stages of the transfer market, so that we're talking about probably July or in the beginning of August. He's going to have an interview with the ACG, which is the Associazione Club Genoani, which is all the association that governs all the clubs around the world. And so there will be a representative from each club that will be able to speak. I don't know for how long and for how many questions will be able to be asked about clarity of the current situation and of what's happening.
I don't know about you. I think this is just a huge mistake. I don't understand what he's doing. I get it. Like,
this is a very important.
Yeah, I mean, the gesture of we need to keep an open relationship and need to have an open dialogue and we need to have these things. But like, the fuck is this guy going to say? Like, there's been a lot of things that have not happened in the way that I think should have happened. And there are things that he said explicitly that like he has not lived up to. And
that's my issue.
What are you going to like? Why even set yourself up to do this? Like, I get that, like, there's the whole thing about it, but I can only imagine, like, this guy can talk his way out of a paper bag if he wants to, but like the results are what they are. And him having a nice, like, flowery set of messaging is not, I'm tired of it. That's why I was kind of messaging on the group chat, like, I'm so tired of that. Like, we don't need someone who is well articulated and knows how to put you at ease. We all are rightfully concerned right now. And the only thing that changes that is how we're actually showing up in the match day. I think the likelihood that there's more bad blood around this and maybe the fans get whipped up again before the match again, like, I see it doing much more harm than good. So I hope that does not happen.
I want to see it more with respect to the fact of what's really happening behind the scenes. So more or less what I was talking about before, the 777 situation and so on. Because a lot of newspapers...
You can't talk about that.
I know people don't understand. I would love to know
that too.
I know a lot of people don't understand that, like, because you see a lot of newspapers that are inventing the things, like one of the creditors of 777 has taken ownership of the club. Like, if people don't know what they're talking about, stop inventing. I mean, that'll always happen. It'll always continue to be that way. But, anyways, so I guess a lot of clarity, at least from an Italian perspective. They're not so used to how structurally companies work. So they're more used to, like, the old style, the president, and that's it. Our president is more of a mere figure, right? So he's just there as a representation, Italian representation, a pure Genoano. So it's more for the fans, in my opinion. Sure, maybe he is part owner, part something. So he has a vested interest. But he's not like your typical president that you see in the clubs around the city.
Yeah. I mean, I'm all for fan relations, and Arsenal have had their history of these things too, where you have like fan reactions and conversations and these types of things. I get it. I'm worried about it, and I really hope it goes well, because we need, at this point, like, we kind of need to have everybody rowing in the same boat, and you just don't. This is where you get that fear in your stomach for this type of a season, because it seems like at any moment we've got an opportunity for people to be turning on each other a little bit, and that's not how the season started, right? Like, we had a bunch of sales right before playing Inter, and we had the entire crowd behind the squad. Everyone remarked about how amazing that was, and how Genoa fans were the man of the match of that one, and everything else. With what has happened recently in recent weeks, which I think is very, very much a minority situation, and I think is much more something that is prevalent on the other side of the city, I don't want us to get dragged into the mud. And I'm worried about a guy who's making false promises, getting in front of a bunch of people, saying anything other than, even if he were to say, I said some things that I shouldn't have said, and I'm sorry, like, the fuck purpose is that going to do? Like, why? And if he doesn't say that, and those are the types of things I worry about. And we don't need that right now. We need to stay together. We need to be behind the Rosso Blue. We need to be supporting these things in the club. And we don't need distractions. Our players are taking a fucking holiday because there's so much shit going on right now in everything around them. Not a holiday, but you know what I mean? They're out away from all of this stuff. So, knock on wood, I hope that it goes well.
Good luck against Ladea. Gasperini, please be an ass.
But Gasperini, have mercy.
Anyways, so the match is coming up against Atalanta at Bergamo. So we will have no followership going over to Bergamo for at least three away matches because of that ban that happened because of the stupid ultras. I'm sorry, guys, but that was just so stupid and dumb.
It was ridiculous. We got baited into it.
We fell into the trap. Essentially, that's, in my opinion, what happened. I'm not going to say more than that, but essentially that's what happened. Anyways, not too many days for preparing it, but luckily after that, before the Bologna match, there is a couple weeks, and I'm hoping that this retreat, or whatever you want to call that, plus the 2 weeks between for the international break, we only have 3 players that are leaving, which is Frendrup is not going anymore, only Thorsby. I think there was another one, I can't remember, but not too many. 2 or 3 at the very most are leaving for the international. Oh, Vasquez, of course, for Mexico. And yeah, so let's do it. I'm not aiming for, predictions or not, I'm not expecting any result, but as long as they play like Rio Grifoni.
That's it. We need to build from what had happened. We need to show more opportunities for ourselves. Hopefully you can do a good accounting of ourselves and try to really pick it up after this match. So we'll be watching.
All right. Never forget, always and forever, Forza Genoa. You've listened to La Lanterna, a spotlight on Italian football, a podcast powered by Genoani Si Resta. Thank you for listening, and see you next week.